Hello everyone, welcome back to OC Recovery's YouTube channel. Today I have a video that Momen wanted me to do, talking about why Stoicism is so important in my life, my personal experiences with Stoicism, how Stoicism relates to REBT and CBT, and just a little bit about why, myself personally, why I choose to live my life in a more philosophical outlook. So, before OCD, I didn't look at Stoicism at all. I didn't look at any philosophy whatsoever, unless I had to look at it in school. I took a couple psychology classes when I was getting my doctorate. I didn't take any in undergrad. I probably didn't pay attention a whole lot because at the time, I think about that at times. Obviously, we talked about obsessive compulsive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD, but they weren't registering. I just was like, just learn the material for the test and pass the test. So, not knowing how important it is in my career too, dealing with people who are in chronic pain, because chronic pain is definitely, there's a lot of psychological aspects to it. We call it the biopsychosocial model. So we know that pain is, in the chronic format, there are more than likely fear avoidance behaviors going on. This is extremely well documented. Anyone that really understands pain research understands you will have to teach the patient fear avoidance behaviors, how to back off of that in cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's definitely some philosophical outlook in multiple areas of my life. Not just making YouTube videos, not just writing articles for the page, the way I like to live my life and so forth. So what happened was, I'll put this behind me so I can sit back a little bit. Got my little, there we go. So I would say the first 6 months of my recovery journey, the first year of my recovery journey, I wasn't so much focused on the stoic outlook when it came to the way I wanted to live my life. I was really looking through the lens of REBT and CBT and rational thought from Alice, some from Aaron Beck, more recently Carl Jung, and just other people as well. I actually read something really cool about Freud yesterday. Some of the stuff I agree with, some of the stuff I don't. So you could pick and choose on what stuff you think is applicable in your life. But the basis, when Dr. Albert Ellis was basically forming REBT in the early 50s and started really putting it into practice by 55 to 59, he was a psychoanalyst. So psychoanalysis, the godfather of psychoanalysis, was Sigmund Freud, as you heard me say before. More looking at the id, the ego, and the superego, looking at childhood trauma and why it shapes us the way we are. There's some major truth to that, but I do believe that even if something has shaped you to who you are today, if you had a very rough childhood, would say a parent who was, deemed a narcissist, for an example, you could still change your outlooks on that person and learn to accept them unconditionally. You can learn to accept your life unconditionally and yourself and move forward. Because all we really have is the moment right now to change. This is where mindfulness can come in. This is where Buddhism can come in. Sometimes I think it's taken a little bit too far, where people say the only thing that matters is the moment. Yes and no, I agree with that. But if you're a business owner, as I always say this example, you'll be thinking about the future. You'll be thinking about the growth of your company and stuff like that. So it's not as simple as just the only thing that matters right now is the moment. There's varying degrees of all types of philosophical outlooks. So there's a really good YouTube channel I always recommend people now. I watch it a lot. It's called Philosophy of Life. There's a guy that does it. He's awesome, very calm voice. I believe he's British. All different types of philosophy, ranging from, anything from pessimism to Epicureanism to Platoism to Stoicism to different motivations and stuff like that. Really breaking down a lot of the Stoic videos. There's 26 of them on the channel. I've watched them all. I wanted to learn a little bit more about it in ways to make this video. And it was a lot of fun. It was a really cool journey going through and watching these videos. I tried to do it when I wasn't distracted. I would set time of day to watch. Watched a lot of stuff by Epictetus, Seneca the Younger, Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius had a pretty crazy life. He ruled from 161 AD to 180 AD. Of those 19 years, I think 12 to 15 years of those years were in battle. So he was gone a lot, fighting a lot, definitely a lot of turmoil, definitely a lot of poverty in his people. He definitely was a man for the people. I don't think his views were in line with the Caesar dictatorial outlook. He was a lot different. Obviously, after he died, he was considered one of the last good emperors of Rome, and then stuff really didn't go the way that he wanted them to. The movie The Gladiator actually has a lot of truth to it. I was kind of correlating what the literature says in the in the actual historical sense, and then kind of comparing it to the movie Gladiator to seeing what aspects came true. But Commodus, his son in the movie Gladiator, kills Marcus Aurelius by suffocating him to death. And from what I can see, he died of a hemorrhage. So that's what I found. I didn't research it too much. So Marcus Aurelius, Stoicism, and stuff like that. I wanted to talk about one of the main differences between Epicureanism and one of the main differences between Stoicism. So I live my life primarily in a Stoic manner. I have a friend of mine who I respect dearly who is also a business owner, and he lives his life in an Epicureanism type of fashion. So they see life as enjoying small pleasures, being a minimalist. He was telling me how he could live off $17,000 a year, which is quite impressive, living outside Portland, which isn't a cheap city. And he said to me something really funny. He said, well, I need the Stoics. I love the Stoics. You guys do all the work for me. I love that mindset. It was a funny mindset. I don't agree with it at all, but it was really cool to hear him speak about this in a way from a different perspective. So Epicureanism is basically, they believe that, there is no afterlife. So life doesn't have exactly a meaning. They don't even want to really make a meaning out of it from what I can tell, from what he's told me. He's been studying Epicureanism for 10 years. And so he lives a very minimalist lifestyle. One of the biggest misconceptions about Epicureanism, from my knowledge, is that people think it's full of sexual fantasies and drinking and getting high. And while that is true, Epicurus realized that those things kind of led to more problems in the long run. So it wasn't really the exact philosophical outlook of Epicureanism. They really lived in a garden. They enjoyed water, bread, and a dessert to them was cheese or a fine meal. One of his quotes said something along the lines of, even if you can afford to have luxurious food every day, doesn't mean you should have them. I do agree with that in majority of the aspect. I can also see if you have the monetary value and you want to have luxurious food every day. I don't think there's a problem with that. I don't think there's a problem with wearing fancy clothes. But what tends to happen is people attach them to that to themselves conditionally. So even though some of the philosophical outlooks don't agree with each other, there was still overlap going on between some of the schools of thought. So Stoicism primarily looks at life through virtues, okay? So the way that Marcus Aurelius in his book Meditations, which I haven't read, but I've read a lot of stuff and listened to a lot of stuff about, scripts and excerpts from the Meditations book. Fun fact, Meditations was not even supposed to be published. That was a personal journal, so thank you for that, whoever did that, 2,000 years ago and so forth. But he realized that suffering was a part of life. So you could either allow that suffering to give your life meaning or allow it to push you into self-pity. The importance of going to work, the importance of doing things when you don't want to do them. One of my favorite quotes by Marcus Aurelius goes something along the lines of, when you do something in your life, you do it no matter how you're feeling. And I really try and live my life by that. And that doesn't always work because we're human and we're fallible. But let's say like yesterday, I had to scrub the tub, okay? I haven't scrubbed my bathtub in almost 2 months. And, Erica was getting on my case. And I was trying to think about all these excuses in my mind. I'll make a YouTube video and do that. Stuff I was more comfortable in. I said, no, get up and just do it. And so I did it. And it wasn't comfortable, but I got it done. And that shows you that you can do things when you are suffering or not feeling well. This is basically the basis of building a low frustration tolerance. Albert Ellis coined low frustration tolerance, and why having a low frustration tolerance and correlating that with avoidance behaviors, whether it's avoiding conversations or places or difficult people, doesn't always work out to your favor in the long run, because it shows yourself subconsciously and unconsciously that you can't stand certain situations. So there's a lot of, so one of the main things with Stoic philosophy is how I live my life. Let's say, I'll give you a great example. Let's say I'm on Facebook and someone says something that I don't agree with politically. Okay, let's just use that. It's a great example right now. Maybe a COVID restriction or something, and they're yelling and they're screaming in their Facebook, and I just read it and I try to put myself in their shoes. I don't try to bash them. And then if I don't agree with them, which a lot of times I may not agree, I don't block them and I don't delete them. Now, there are certain philosophical outlooks by Immanuel Kant, who's one of them, who I believe states that you should avoid certain people in your life cold-heartedly that don't align with your values. I think that's a problem. I understand, you're the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with, these very small terminology and black and white overgeneralizations. It is harder to have a positive outlook and get things done when you're surrounded by people who are negative all the time. But you don't need to purposely go out there and avoid all negativity in your life, because this can become problematic as well. You start to teach yourself that you can't handle certain situations. You start to teach yourself that you can't stand certain situations. And this really puts a lot of conditional acceptance on your life, whether it's conditional other life acceptance and obviously conditional self-acceptance as well. So the Stoic philosophy is very important to me. I've come to realize, working on OCD recovery for, I don't know, a little over a year and a half, that even when I'm feeling or I'm having, a rougher day on my newer things I've been dealing with, it doesn't mean I can't get stuff done. It doesn't mean that I can't embrace change. So change is an important part of life. I was listening to another great quote the other day that said, you could either embrace change or believe in your mind that you're never going to have change in your life. Where life is always changing and you have no idea what's going to happen to you in your life. Oh, Erica's home. So you really just don't know what's going to happen to you, and you can only take life in strides. And basically, if something happens to you in your life, you can approach that in a situation where you're either going to let it crush you or you're going to move forward and build some low frustration tolerance. Whereas my buddy who studies Epicureanism, he thinks that, they do want to diminish suffering in your life, but they also want in a way to avoid all sorts of suffering. If there's unnecessary suffering, why would you do that? Well, I see stuff as, you accept the fact that you more than likely will have adversities and suffer in your life. So you might as well learn from those adversities or suffering, even if you're agnostic or atheist and don't believe in the afterlife. And that's a big misconception too. People think automatically if you are an atheist or agnostic and you don't believe in an afterlife, then automatically, life has no meaning, so you shouldn't do anything. Well, that doesn't make sense either. You could still believe that there's no afterlife and still have purpose in your life and push yourself through suffering moments and turn your adversities into situations that benefit yourself and others, aka the works of Albert Ellis. Albert Ellis was atheist. I don't think he even was agnostic. He was straight atheist. I know other people who are atheists and have deep meaning in their life, contentment, whether it's spirituality, for monetary purposes, whatever that person deems, in a way to where they're not putting it as a conditional acceptance on yourself. So there's many other ways to go about building, philosophy into your life, and it really can bring down some major suffering. So Albert Ellis knew this when he was building REBT. I'm sure if we were inside his mind for those 8, 7, 6, maybe even 10 years formulating these hypotheses and testing them in his patients and really just straying away from the Sigmund Freud method, realizing that, he didn't see the results he wanted to see. He didn't want people to become dependent on outside events. He didn't say that these events didn't mean anything, because they certainly do. I always use an extreme example. You're not going to go to an Auschwitz patient and say to them, or an Auschwitz survivor, and say, oh, your experience is fucking meaningless. It's all your belief. No, they've went through an experience that definitely is meaningful, but they have the choice to accept that it happened, even though it's a very unfair and unfortunate event. And we certainly did not want to lose our family, maybe our children. But now, 30 years later, out of Auschwitz, you might be able to bring meaning to your life, aka Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl created logotherapy, So I am a big believer in the Stoic philosophy and virtuous outlook, and that there is meaning in suffering. Not everyone sees that. I'm very happy for my OCD. I think the journey has been it's almost a life revamp, of a spiritual awakening in a sense. So this is the opening video where I wanted to talk about Stoicism. I'm going to actually pull the whiteboards out for the next one and really go into depth about Stoicism. I'm going to break down Seneca the Younger. I'm going to break down Epictetus. I'm going to break down Marcus Aurelius. One of the most famous stories surrounding Epictetus is that he was a slave. And then later on, after he was free, came out to be one of the four, thought minds in Stoicism ever. So, I think if I remember correctly, his owner was tightening something over his leg, and he said to him, hey, you're going to break my leg. And he didn't listen. He broke his leg, and he just looked at him and he said, hey, I told you. And he was so amazed that he didn't get angry at him. He was so amazed of his resolve that he freed him from slavery, and then he became an amazing Stoic philosopher. So things in your life, while frustrating, sad, that might make you cry, that might make you contemplate certain things in your life, they're not driving the response that you have right now. What's driving the response you have right now is that current belief you have on the situation. This is from Stoicism. This is from other Greco-Roman philosophies, and they're really good. Something else I've been looking at recently is Plato. did not know that Plato was not about democracy. He did not believe that. This is why looking at, and I don't agree with anything I've read and listened to right now about Plato, and one of the most intelligent minds ever, basically stated that he didn't think that people in a certain category had any right to vote or make any decisions whatsoever. So let's say you were a peasant or a slave. You had no ability to put any forethought into any political realm or anything like that. He was very big on politics, which I do agree with. I love being political. I like looking at viewpoints. I try to look at the people, even though some of them do make me laugh. I look at the policies. What do I think is good for me? What do I think is good for business, border control, all these other different factors. He believed that if you didn't get involved in that, you could just get run over by other people there, and you can accept that. Absolutely. You don't need to be involved in politics. I enjoy it, and I can also accept that other people don't want to be involved in politics. The one thing I don't agree with him is, if I remember correctly, he said that if you don't get involved in politics, inferior people will take over your life. And I don't think they're inferior. They're just people that are in the politics and you were not at that time. So they're just making the decisions for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really love philosophy. Again, the channel Philosophy for Life on YouTube is a great place to start. I think there's a great book called How to Live Like a Stoic, which I'll be reading soon. And I'll go from there. And don't be afraid to look at other philosophical outlooks. You don't need to agree with everything. There's plenty of things I do not agree with. I try to go in non-judgment. This has been a tremendous fucking battle for me, okay? I have been very conditioned to look at things in black and white manner and not agree. I try my best to not do that anymore, and I still struggle with this, I'll be lying, but it's getting better and the journey is going the way it's going. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and have a great day.